Greetings again, everybody. Welcome back to Dark Souls 2. Today we're gonna start the first of 3 DLCs. And we're gonna start with the one that was released first, actually. The Crown of the Sunken King. But we could do any of the DLCs in any order that we want. They're pretty much self-contained, with some ties to the main game. Some minor ties, rather, but still. This is the entrance, we've seen it already, and these stone tablets just give us a little bit of flavor. Although I think I might be reading them in the wrong order. Anyway, this is the entrance, and we could go into the DLC even if we hadn't purchased it. But I have purchased it, of course. The thing is, there's a door right in this room here, we can see it, which we could not enter if we had not bought the DLC. But there's a purpose to this room. You see those weird totems there that kind of in the middle of the room with these tiles or whatever? We can place a summon sign on there and be summoned to an area later into the DLC. A very specific area, not actually a good area, but it's the area that people who haven't bought the DLC can visit. Now this door, however, is the one that you would not be able to open. Once you actually buy the DLC, you get the key for this door, but the entire DLC is basically already downloaded because, well, the DLC file itself is just a couple kilobytes big. Definitely not big enough to get an area such as this with this kind of weird perspective. Yeah. I really like this introduction. All 3 DLCs kind of have a good intro. But out of all 3 DLCs, and I don't just mean the introduction, this is probably my favorite. Although, maybe also the easiest. Debatable though. And here we see our goal basically right away, that big pyramid tower thing. And we get a good view of the entire area actually. Can't really hit any of the things down there yet though. Yeah, as we go into the DLC we can actually see almost the entire area with some exceptions, and yeah. That might not have been the most polite thing, just shooting an arrow in that guy's head, but it's not like he will greet us with hospitality either. I mean, he won't attack us here. He will always do that, whether you attack him or just, you know, just run past him or do whatever with him. You can do whatever and he will always just fly away. So, Crown of the Sunken King and all the other DLCs as well, you'll probably notice, have a lot more complex level design than the main game. Which is good, because one of the biggest criticisms I have for the main game's individual levels is that they all feel very, very linear. Don't get me wrong, the first game also had very linear levels, but there seemed to be a little more exploration in them. Not just get through them, even though they were about as linear. But here I get this sense of exploration again, which is one of the, well, my favorite parts of the first Dark Souls. It wasn't really the gameplay challenge, though that was a big part of it, and how fun it was. But the thing is, Dark Souls 2 improved over the gameplay in just about every way. It's everything else that I kind of prefer about Dark Souls. The first one, I mean. But let's just assume that every time I say Dark Souls, I mean the first one, okay? I probably should have established that way earlier. But yes. This game, or rather this DLC, has a little more, well, exploration based, and also not as linear level design. It is still linear, of course. There's one starting point and one end point, and occasionally there will be some branches, which is more than the main game for the most part. But where it really shines is just that feeling it gives you. The feeling of discovering a long forgotten part of the world. I mean, it is implied that this is even further down than Black Gulch, which previously was just basically the bottom of the world. But this is even deeper. If there's one thing I would have improved about the introduction, well, it would be to not make us teleport to the area, but instead have us kind of go down a tunnel of some fashion or whatever, just to give us that feeling of progressing from the already deep down Black Gulch to the even further down Shulva. But hey, yeah, we have these kind of, I don't want to say platforms necessarily, but they are platforms, which you can raise and lower at will by just hitting those switches. Sometimes, of course, they will bring us to treasure, and we might have to use them in some inventive ways. But don't think that this whole puzzle solving thing is gonna be a big prominent part. There will be this puzzle solving, and there have been people that have compared this DLC more to a Zelda temple, but it's not really as in-depth. But it's a very fun distraction. I think it's implemented fairly well. And we could actually ride the lower part of the platform to go even further down, but I don't think there's anything down there. There is, however, something down there. And of course, to get it, we just need to hit that one switch if we can. A little bit of a trick I like to use when I bring heavy weapon characters. I just bring a light weapon, such as a dagger, to hit those small things, just to make it a little faster, you know? But this shouldn't be a problem here. The problem is more the kind of directional attack. And the fact that I almost got hung up on the geometry of the level and died, but thankfully the enemy was not as aggressive. In general, the enemies here aren't really that aggressive. Their entire thing is that they're pretty slow. They just, you know, can take a lot of abuse. Those enemies in here, though, can't take a lot of abuse, and that's pretty good. Because if I had let that guy, he would have started kind of oozing acid, I guess. Which would mean that if we get close to it, we would just get our equipment broken. Our weapons too, by the way. The acid we can walk through kind of miraculously did not harm our weapons. The acid of those guys definitely does destroy our weapons. Trust me, I know for some reason. And this platform is not a shortcut back to the beginning, but if we leave this platform up, it's a way faster way through the area. Should we need it. Because we die, because the next bonfire is actually pretty well hidden. First time around I didn't find it for a very long time. Honestly, I only found it because I came back to this area specifically to look for it. But thanks to the shortcut, you can still traverse the area relatively quickly. If you know how to get through it, it's actually not very long. Speaking of not very long and getting through it pretty quickly, I will not be showing any New Game Plus segments this time around. Instead, they will be their separate videos. Mostly because I went through it fairly quickly and efficiently. I want to switch up the formula a little bit. And if you notice down there, that big green thing, that's a bunch of those stupid poison dart statues that have been annoying us. And yeah, we're going back and forth a little bit. Mostly because this area has kind of a lot of small nooks, crannies, and kind of alternate paths. Short alternate paths, but still, they're there. And it's sometimes necessary to just go weird roads to show everything. Now there's a switch below that will allow us to actually make another platform come out so we can walk across, but I didn't need that. For some reason though, most of the time if I try to jump across there, it doesn't work. it acts kind of weird. But yep, there it is. Didn't need it though. But the main reason to come up there is just to bring out that other platform. Because it's the only way to actually get in there, which is more of those acid bugs. In general, the theme of this DLC, if I had to put it down, is Decay. A lot of the enemies either poison us or destroy our equipment with acid. And this is kind of true for the level itself in some fashion, but just be assured that there will be a lot of poison, a lot of acid, and also maybe petrification, who knows. It might happen. The more observant among you will have noticed that I actually switched up my equipment a little bit. I don't mean the obvious stuff like the headpiece we're wearing, which is actually the black headpiece, at least I think it's called the black hood, but I suppose it is. And it actually increases our faith and intelligence by a little bit. And for that stat boost I decided to just wear it, plus it still looks pretty sweet. The other more obvious change is that we're now using a bow instead of a crossbow. We barely ever used a crossbow anyway. Most of the time on accident when my controller was freaking out or I accidentally hit the D-pad to switch weapons. Which happened more than I care to admit, but you probably saw that one time or the other. Now the other thing that we switched out is our main weapon. Previously this was the S-Talk. Well, thrusting sword with minimal scaling. It has decent strength scaling though. Strength scaling in general is a little better for raw damage. Dex scaling, not so much. Dex scaling is supposed to add more to kind of supporting effects such as bleed, but it doesn't really work out. Most people think Dex weapons are pretty bad that way, but they aren't. Dex weapons aren't supposed to make damage, but hey, we're using a Dex weapon now actually. With the minimal dexterity requirement, the Espada Ropera, which I think is 20 dexterity. But it still does more damage than our S-Talk. Though if we were to infuse our S-Talk, it would probably fare better than the Espada Ropera in this case. But we didn't, and we shouldn't. Because in this kind of DLC, and in all the DLCs in fact, enemies kind of have really high elemental resistances. They're not all completely resistant to them. There's no lion warrior levels of immunity, such as them to magic and almost everything else. Lightning to a very minorly lesser extent. And dark, not so much. But yeah, in this DLC and all the other DLCs, which was also true for the first game's DLC by the way, the enemies have a lot of elemental resistances, which is why it's a bad idea to actually infuse a weapon. You can still buff it, but you should probably bring a raw physical weapon just to have a reliable means of dealing damage. I did go through this area with a hex build. I used hexes exclusively and had a dark infused weapon. It was still very possible and far from impossible. In fact, I wouldn't really call it much harder. I just played a little more carefully anyway because that character couldn't really take a lot. But yeah, your builds won't be gimped here. It's just that you'll have to maybe be a little more patient. And here we have a couple of platforms, and as you might think, there's something to it. There are items on the lower parts of some of these. There's one right there. And if we raise and lower the platforms in the right order, or rather raise and lower the right platforms, we can grab that. Now, we can also grab that without doing that, as I'm about to show you, but it's hardly the ideal way. If you just want to get to the next bonfire though, you should raise all the platforms. Because what they do is they actually build you a path towards the next bonfire. But first, well, there's something we need to take care of. After we take care of that guy. You can't really hit them, by the way. You can sometimes hit them with an S-Tog or thrusting sword in general or other weapons that have very directed or very low swinging attacks. But if you really want to reliably take them out, you need to kind of shoot them at the bottom with a ranged weapon. And over there we have these ominous red-eyed statues that are very reminiscent of the poison dart statues. We can't destroy them with arrows, but magic will do the trick. And I suppose great arrows will work as well. Behind those, we can barely see there's another one of those switches. And yeah, there's a little path over there, and now we can actually go over there. I reckon that most people actually missed this. I know I did. I mean, I saw that there was something, I just couldn't really figure out how to get there. And all we get is one big, weird thing, and a notched whip +7. As well as a miracle that slows us down and everything that tries to follow us. Just so you know what it does. But now, what does that thing do? What I did fail to show is what it does, yeah. If you hit it with a notched whip, or any whip I reckon would work, it will actually repair all the stuff you're currently holding, which is really damn neat. But I kinda forgot about that. Instead, I went on to murder it like a fool. On the bright side though, it's not really that useful, because every time you want to repair something you have to come here. Which you probably don't want to do. Oh yeah, let's not dwell on that and just move on with our lives. Like, let's just go to the next bonfire, shall we? And as you can see, since we raised all the platforms, we have a rather convenient path to where we want to go. On the minus side, we kind of have a problem now, because we can't really go down there as easily and collect our items. There's just 2 of them down there. None of them are actually unique to the DLC. But still, they are things that you might find useful under some circumstances. So all we would need to do is actually lower that platform we're standing on currently to have an easier time, but you know, I'm kind of too lazy to do it. Now, this is something that you shouldn't try at home, honestly. It's not something that's gonna help a lot. And yeah, we did pick up a Dark Quartz Ring +3 earlier. And right now the Thunder Quartz Ring +3. The DLC actually has some +3 rings. And there is another item, which I'll also want to get. These platform puzzles are nice and all, but most of the time I'm kind of too lazy to think ahead of time and arrange it in a way that makes me go through it a lot quicker. But hey. This little house here, by the way, brings us right back to the beginning of this little circuit. Because, well, we've been here before, and we could just bypass this entire part with a platform and this bonfire. So, if you don't find the bonfire and have to use that shortcut I pointed out, well, that's how. And by the way, yeah, to actually get this item you do have to lower the platform. But the other one you can get just fine. And it's just some upgrade materials. Hardly worth it death, but at least it's kind of weird death, right? Yeah, I was afraid this would go on forever for just a brief moment there. But yeah, now we actually have time to go to where we need to go. And since the game isn't a complete dig, it will actually spawn our souls in the last safe spot to stand in that can't move, because the platform's moving objects, it won't actually place your souls on there. Which is really, really nice. This, by the way, is a general rule. The game just won't do that. It'll always place it on some ground that's always safe to stand on. And now, down we go. We're pretty close to that tower pyramid thing. There's a term for it, it just eludes me right now. Oh yeah. Look, right across that bridge and... well, thanks for taking out those enemies, I guess. This, of course, he'll only do the first time you come here. The second and third and fourth attempt, you will have to take out the enemies yourself. And this elevator right now is inactive. It'll be a while until we actually activate it. In fact, it's not necessary to ever activate it, it just leads to a little bit of an optional area. The co-op area, in fact. And we just picked up our first DLC spell. I'll be trying to use them at some point, but this one basically is a laser. Oh, a cigarette! It's a cigarette, right? But anyway, we're gonna explore that next time.